a coastal town in Japan. In spring, the weather is warm and sunny. Kinto, as always, is busy in the kitchen of his family restaurant, methodically washing ingredients, organizing utensils, and preparing for the day's service. This restaurant was inherited from his father, Kohei. After his father's passing, Kinto upheld his wishes, not only continuing to provide free children's meals, but also allocating a portion of the restaurant's profits each month to donate to children's charities. Sunlight streams through the glass window, casting a warm glow, but it fails to dispel the sorrow in Kyota's eyes. His sister Yuka has been missing for 30 years. Throughout these 30 years, Kyota and Kinto have never given up searching, yet there has been no trace. No one knows Yuka's whereabouts, and even her life or death remains a mystery. Kyota is nearly in despair, but Kinto still believes that Yuka must be alive, and he will continue to wait. Just as Kinto steps outside to place the sign, a car suddenly loses control and speeds towards him, nearly hitting Kinto and crashing into half of the restaurant's wall. The restaurant is forced to close. After dealing with the aftermath of the accident, Kinto returns home, weary. Kyota's rational side during the day still lingers in his ears. Kinto opens the high school yearbook, his gaze fixed on Yuka's smiling face in the photo, not moving for a long time. Young, vibrant Yuka, her smile bright as sunshine. At that time, Yuka was Kinto's salvation and refuge. However, Kinto failed to protect the one he cherished. Kinto's thoughts drift back to high school days. At that time, the restaurant was run by his father, Kohei. Yuka and her younger brother Kyota, who was in elementary school, were regulars, but the siblings often only ordered one plate of butter-fried udon to share. Because Kohei provided free children's meals for a long time, Kinto, upon seeing this scene after school, often reminded his father to give Kyota an extra bowl of noodles. At first, Kinto did not recognize Yuka as a classmate. He just thought her eyes were particularly beautiful and couldn't help but glance at her a few more times. It wasn't until shortly after school started, when the teacher assigned the two to jointly handle the class newspaper, that Kinto discovered Yuka was actually in the same class as him. Kinto had few friends at school, and Yuka was always alone. This task unexpectedly connected the two lonely individuals. They agreed to meet in the library to discuss interview topics, with past newspapers spread out on the table, but the atmosphere felt a bit awkward. Kinto stared at the floor while Yuka looked at the manuscript, both too shy to meet each other's gaze. Eventually, Yuka broke the silence first, suggesting they form a club with just the two of them, called the Leisure Club. Kinto responded with a couple of humorous remarks, bringing a smile to Yuka's face. Just then, a summer breeze blew in through the window, lifting Yuka's hair at her temples, and her smile shone brightly in the sunlight. Kinto was momentarily speechless, even his breathing slowed. After that, the relationship between the two gradually became familiar. On the way home from school, Yuka's figure appeared beside Kinto. They walked along the shaded path, the wind rustling through the leaves, their shadows intertwined in the afternoon sunlight. Yuka's smiles and frowns were like pebbles thrown into Kinto's heart lake, creating ripples. At the intersection at the alley, it was the place where they said goodbye every day. Each time they waved goodbye, Yuka would always smile and say "see you tomorrow," then turn and head home, reminiscing about the moments spent with Kinto. However, when Yuka stood at her doorstep, looking at the building hidden in the shadows, the smile on her face suddenly faded. Yuka's family was in dire straits. Her mother was missing, and her stepfather was immersed in alcohol all day. The only warmth in the house came from her stepfather's son, Kyota. Though they were not blood-related, Yuka regarded him as a brother. Even so, her stepfather often looked down on Yuka and would resort to violence at the slightest provocation. After each outburst from her stepfather, Kyota would hang his head in guilt, believing that his and his father's presence brought misfortune to his sister. Yuka, on the other hand, would smile and comfort her brother, telling him not to worry, teaching him to take deep breaths, clear his mind, and recall joyful memories. But when she looked at the cover of the notebook she had drawn with Kinto, tears would still silently fall. Days like this seemed endless. Yuka felt anxious at home and walked on eggshells at school. A group of girls in her class simply disliked Yuka and loved to provoke trouble. Fortunately, Kinto became Yuka's support. When Yuka was once again cornered, it was Kinto who stepped in just in time to help her out. In class, Kinto's gaze often unconsciously drifted to Yuka's seat. After school, the two accidentally discovered a corner in the library that stored old books. No one passed by there, and the smell of books was comforting. Yuka extended her pinky finger, wanting to make a promise with Kinto, agreeing that this place would be their secret base. Unexpectedly, Kinto hurriedly left, because Kinto never easily made promises. When Kinto was in elementary school, his mother was seriously ill. The next month was the school open day, and his mother had promised Kinto with a pinky swear that she would get better and attend. However, as the open day approached, what Kinto received was a portrait of his mother after her passing. His mother had made a promise that she could not keep. The pain of that sudden loss of hope was deeply etched in Kinto's heart. From that moment on, Kinto feared making promises and did not dare to accept others' commitments, afraid of being unable to fulfill them, and even more afraid of experiencing the taste of hope turning into disappointment again. After Kinto left the library, he was cornered by bullies from his class. Just because they were unhappy that Kinto's father provided free children's meals, the bullies frequently caused trouble. A few of them splashed drinks on Kinto's head, and even his friend Ishimura was affected. Kinto returned to the classroom in a disheveled state, afraid to meet Yuka's probing or mocking gaze. But Yuka said nothing, simply took out a clean towel and gently wiped Kinto. The classroom after school was very quiet, with only the faint sound of the towel rubbing against hair and the soft breaths of the two. When Yuka approached with the towel, a subtle fragrance wafted into Kinto's nostrils. Kinto's heart raced suddenly, and strangely, the grievances and embarrassment from earlier bullying seemed to be soothed by Yuka's gentle actions. Both of them were outcasts in the class. Kinto was ridiculed for his father's good deeds, while Yuka was ostracized for her silence. They were like weak grass leaning against the wall, relying solely on the warmth they provided each other to grow. However, the bullying intensified. The next day at school, Kinto found his desk covered in insults written in marker, and his friend Ishimura's desk was not spared either. Kinto thought that if it weren't for his father's provision of free meals attracting the bullies' hostility, Ishimura wouldn't be affected. Kinto went to the office to borrow a cleaner, wanting to help Ishimura clean up, but as he squatted in front of the desk, staring at the glaring words, his hand holding the cleaner hesitated to move. Kinto did not understand what he had done wrong. At that moment, Yuka appeared again. Like last time, Yuka said nothing, just picked up a cloth, poured some cleaner on it, and bent down to wipe. Watching Yuka's hair fall and her focused profile, Kinto's sense of grievance dissipated significantly. After they cleaned the desk, the sky outside suddenly darkened, and heavy rain began to fall. The two, without any rain gear, walked side by side into the rain. Rainwater slid off Kinto's eyelashes, blurring his vision, but Yuka's smile in the rain was particularly clear. Her hair stuck to her cheek, the corners of her mouth turned up, her eyes crescent-shaped, showing no frustration at being soaked. The cool summer rain dispelled the heat and also lightened Kinto's gloom. Looking at Yuka beside him and listening to the sound of rain hitting the leaves, Kinto suddenly felt how beautiful this scene was. How many times in life can one have someone by their side, accompanying them without asking for a reason, sharing the rain, and overcoming difficulties? Even if it seemed absurd, it was also incredibly precious. But the ongoing bullying was not a long-term solution. Kinto naively thought that as long as his father stopped providing free children's meals, the bullies would lose their reason to provoke and would stop. However, from his father Kohei's perspective, happiness was never tied to education or income. The key was whether one could discern and choose based on their true feelings. Kohei believed that providing free meals for children could help them and made him happy, so he continued to do so. Kohei simply followed his heart and had never been swayed by rumors over the years. But now, because of this kindness, the son is being bullied at school, and Kohei cannot stand by. Since Kinto has raised the issue, let's stop providing the children's meals. However, Kohei wants Kinto to understand that this action is not a compromise with the bullies, but a choice made by a father to protect his son. Kohei hopes that Kinto will not bear a heavy psychological burden because of this. 30 years have passed, and the same restaurant is now run by Kinto. Once, out of fear of being bullied, Kinto asked his father to stop the charitable acts. Now, Kinto has become a reflection of his father, actively donating a portion of the restaurant's meager earnings to children's charities and insisting on providing free meals to children in need. This original intention has remained unchanged for many years. But because of this, after the restaurant was destroyed, Kinto has no funds left for repairs. Looking at the damaged walls, a familiar sense of helplessness rises in his heart. He failed to protect Yuka back then, allowing her to vanish without a trace. Now, can he not even keep this warm shelter for children? After Kinto's charitable deeds for children were reported by the local TV station, an engineer named Mocha came forward, willing to provide renovation services for free. However, in exchange, Mocha hopes that after the project is completed, Kinto can agree to a request. As for the specific request, Mocha has not yet stated it. Kinto agreed to the condition but looking at the other person's eyes, he felt an inexplicable familiarity. Kinto's thoughts returned to 30 years ago. The end-of-term exams for the first year of high school were over, and summer vacation had arrived. Compared to the excitement of most classmates, Kinto was unusually silent. Thinking about the reason for losing the opportunity to run the newspaper during the break, he couldn't even find an excuse to see Yuka, and his heart felt empty, making it hard to muster any interest. This thought was noticed by his father, Kohei. Kohei had long seen that his son had developed feelings for the girl who often came to dine. So after dinner, he took out a large bill and told Kinto to go to the convenience store to buy soy sauce, keeping the change for himself, which could be used for watching movies or treating someone to a meal. Encouraged by his father, Kinto gathered his courage and walked towards Yuka's house with 2 movie tickets. As he approached, he saw his friend Ishimura appear with visible injuries. It turned out that Ishimura, unwilling to be bullied any longer, had fought back today. Just as Kinto admired Ishimura's bravery, a scream suddenly came from inside the house. Immediately, Yuka stumbled out, followed by her stepfather who was throwing punches. Seeing Yuka pushed to the ground, Ishimura immediately lunged to subdue Yuka's stepfather, while Kinto took the opportunity to escape with Yuka. Feeling the pain in her body, Yuka finally opened up to Kinto. That house was not a real home. She truly wanted to escape to a peaceful place without alcohol, fists, and the grim face of her stepfather. But where exactly is such a place? Looking at the bloodstains at the corner of Yuka's mouth, Kinto felt a deep pain in his heart. However, what could a 15-year-old boy do to save Yuka? Kinto suddenly remembered a place he had visited with his family during a summer trip, where there was a vast blue sea. Perhaps enjoying the scenery could help Yuka temporarily forget her worries. The two boarded a train heading to the seaside. The scenery outside flew by, but Kinto's figure kept appearing in Yuka's mind. Yuka smiled and asked Kinto if, in the future, when she found herself in danger, he would be able to come to her rescue in time. Facing Yuka's hopeful gaze, Kinto lowered his head again and admitted that he couldn't easily promise, for if he failed to keep his word, it would ultimately hurt her. But if Kinto couldn't protect Yuka, what would happen if she faced bullying again in the future? Yuka truly didn't want to be trapped under her stepfather's shadow any longer. Did it mean that only death could end this endless suffering? Yuka's heart was filled with chaotic thoughts, rising and falling with the rumble of the train. At that moment, a woman dressed in a black suit sat down across from Yuka. Seeing Yuka, the woman couldn't help but smile and informed them that they were on their way to her niece's 49th day memorial service. Since Yuka was of a similar age to her niece, she felt a sense of closeness. The woman lamented that if it weren't for that car accident, her niece would still be alive, and there would surely be many beautiful things to look forward to. These words suddenly ignited a spark in Yuka's eyes. Death meant an end, but as long as one was still alive, there was infinite hope. Yuka was only 15. There were still many beautiful things ahead, and she must not give up. After arriving at their destination, Kinto called his father to inform him that he wouldn't be coming home tonight. Kohei was still worried about his underage son staying out late. But Kinto interrupted his father's concerns. Didn't you always teach me to follow my heart in life? If he has someone he cares about, he only wishes that person can show a smile. Kohei immediately guessed that the person was Yuka. Every time Yuka brought her brother, she only ordered a bowl of noodles to share, which showed how poor her family was. Coupled with the background of a blended family, she must have suffered a lot at home. Before hanging up, Kohei specifically reminded his son to take good care of Yuka. On the way to the beach, Yuka suddenly stopped and looked at the surrounding houses. She didn't seek wealth or glory. She only wished to live in a house with a terrace when she grew up, enjoying the warm sun and sipping tea on clear days, living a peaceful and leisurely life. At an age full of ambition, most people dream of becoming heroes or rich. Kinto never expected Yuka's aspirations to be so simple and ordinary. The sea breeze, hearing the scent of sunshine, rushed towards them. The two walked side by side along the path to the seaside. Yuka sat on a high viewing platform, swinging her feet, gazing at the distant sea, and a sense of indescribable happiness arose from deep within her heart. Before the summer vacation, Yuka fantasized about spending the holiday with Kinto. In her imagination, the two would go to a beautiful place and leisurely enjoy the summer of their 15th year. However, more real than her fantasy was the punch thrown by her stepfather. Just when Yuka was on the verge of despair, Kinto appeared like a ray of light, suddenly piercing through the gloom that enveloped her world. Summer rains always come unexpectedly. As the sun set in the west, heavy rain poured down once again. Kinto took Yuka to shelter under the eaves. The darkening sky concealed the sparkle in Yuka's eyes. Her profile hidden in the dimness, shrouded in a faint haze. Kinto suddenly felt worried. How would Yuka face her father after today? Yuka, however, laughed and told Kinto not to worry, as she had long been accustomed to the life of abuse from her stepfather. Over the years, her stepfather had given her almost no living expenses, and if it weren't for Kinto's father providing free meals for children, the siblings might have starved long ago, let alone come here to see the sea. But Yuka was not a superhero. She would also hide under the covers and cry when beaten. After crying, what could she do? So Yuka developed a skill. Through deep breathing, she could freeze her emotions and numb her pain for a short time, forcing herself to recall joyful things, like the leisure club she formed with Kinto or the afternoons they spent together. These were the motivations that supported her to face a new day. Looking at Yuka's broken smile, Kinto's heart suddenly tightened. At least Kinto still had his loving father, while Yuka seemed to have nothing left but herself. After the rain stopped, Kinto took Yuka to a hillside facing the sea. Kinto remembered that when his mother was alive, he had found a 4-leaf clover here, a symbol of luck. But Yuka told Kinto that she would soon be moving to the countryside because her stepfather believed that there were friends and family to help there, and the rent was cheaper. Yuka had wanted to finish the class newspaper before transferring schools, but her stepfather had reacted violently because of it. Yuka was reluctant to part with her memories of Kinto, but at 15, she was powerless to decide her fate and could only obey. Before leaving, Yuka wanted to do something small for Kinto, so she bent down to search for a 4-leaf clover in the grass. Kinto saw this and joined her, but they searched for a long time without success. Kinto solemnly handed Yuka the 4-leaf clover bookmark he had always carried with him. It was a gift from Kinto's mother, which he had kept by his side for many years, guarding a small piece of stable luck. At this moment, Kinto wanted to pass this luck on to Yuka. Yuka, go to a farther place, to somewhere you can never see this town again. I like you and want to protect you forever. This was Kinto's first time breaking his principles, actively making a promise. He forgot the unfulfilled promises made by his mother, forgot the disappointment of broken commitments. At this moment, his only thought was, he could not let Yuka return to that cold home. He could not let her be harmed again. Yuka clutched the small bookmark, her eyes growing warm. Yuka understood that what Kinto handed over was not just a 4-leaf clover, but also his heartfelt intention to protect her. Thus, Yuka secretly resolved to escape the clutches of her stepfather and embark on a new journey. The next morning, the two headed to the station, preparing to take the train back to the town. While waiting, Yuka applied for child protection from the police. After hanging up the phone, she looked at Kinto, who was resting with his eyes closed, and softly said, "Goodbye, Kinto." When the police arrived to take Yuka away, Kinto reminded her not to forget their promise. "It's a promise, and we will find happiness, and we will live in a house with a big terrace." Yuka boarded a vehicle that would not take her home, meaning she would say a complete farewell to Kinto. The sunlight streamed through the car window, illuminating Yuka's hand and the 4-leaf clover bookmark in her palm. The leaf patterns were clearly visible, just like Kinto's intentions, accompanying Yuka towards an unknown yet hopeful future. Watching Yuka disappear at the end of the road, Kinto returned home alone. After the summer vacation, he would return to the days of going to and from school alone. But worse still, Kinto seemed to have made a promise that would be hard to keep. After all, what could a 15-year-old boy do to protect Yuka? Seeing his son downcast, Kohei pondered for a moment, then turned to fetch a notebook from the inner room and handed it to Kinto. This was a diary written by his wife during her illness, and some of the words Kohei had intended to show Kinto only after he came of age, but perhaps now was the right time. Kinto flipped to the last page of the diary. The date recorded was precisely the day his mother had made a promise with Kinto to attend the open day. His mother wrote, "Today, I made a promise that I cannot keep, but I only wish for Kinto to smile longer and happier. In this life, there may still be moments of tears, and perhaps I will still lose something incredibly precious. However, even if we never meet again, this longing and love will never change." Tears swirled in Kinto's eyes. He instinctively flipped back a page and found a 4-leaf clover bookmark. On the bookmark, it was written in pencil, "Mom, I love you." The very one Kinto had given to his mother in his childhood. It turned out that his mother had kept it treasured in the diary. Tears blurred his vision, but they also washed away the confusion and guilt in his heart. Kinto suddenly realized that what mattered was not the promise itself, but the heartfelt intention hidden behind it. Kinto informed his father that the children's meals should continue, as there were surely more children in town like Yuka and her siblings who needed help. Even if he could not find Yuka at this moment or fulfill the promise of always protecting her, at least he could carry on his parents' intentions and pass on this warmth to more people in need. Just as his mother said, one person's heart for another never fades. Time passed. One day after school started, Kinto suddenly received a letter from Yuka. The letter read, "Fortunately, on that day Kinto took her out. She was able to step out of her small world and into a new realm. Do you remember that house with the large terrace? Now, in pursuit of her dreams, she has left that home with her brother, hiding in a place unknown to anyone, working part-time and studying to save money. The lady on the train once said that as long as one is alive, there is infinite hope. Kinto, by the station, once said that everything will be fine. She always remembers these words, persevering through hard work and long, fearful nights. For they made Yuka firmly believe that she would find the happiness she longs for in her heart. How about reuniting one day and continuing the leisure activities? I have so much to say, wanting to share the interesting customers I've encountered while working, and to complain about Kyoto always snatching the meat from my bowl. Additionally, I must try the butter-fried udon that uncle makes again. I have been longing for that taste for a long time." The day spent with Kinto has indeed changed Yuka's life trajectory. Now Yuka is doing well, grateful to Kinto for giving her the courage to take the first step. Upon learning that Yuka is well, Kinto felt a bit comforted. Since the day he received the letter, Kinto has been looking forward to the day they would meet again. However, this wait turned out to be a full 30 years. What Kinto did not know was that on the day Yuka sent this letter, her stepfather came to find her. The stepfather's face was twisted with rage, ordering Yuka to return home immediately with Kyoto. In the scuffle, Yuka unfortunately fell to the ground, her head striking a protruding stone by the roadside, blood flowing profusely. All of Yuka's memories of the past also vanished that day. On the day the restaurant was completed, Mocha, who had offered help, told Kinto a story. Mocha's mother was hospitalized due to an injury when she was young, and after waking up, she forgot her identity and no one recognized her, becoming a blank person without a past. Even so, her mother always remembered her dream of becoming an architect, worked hard, and later founded an architectural company. Her mother was gentle, cheerful, and diligent, always warming Mocha with her smile. In her memory, Mocha only saw her mother cry once. During a family trip to the seaside, her mother suddenly cried while looking at the vast sea, saying she always felt she had been there before, but could not remember something very important. At that moment, Mocha realized her mother had lost her past memories. Thus, Mocha resolved to help her mother search for what was sealed deep within her heart. After saying this, Mocha took out a 4-leaf clover bookmark from her bag and handed it to Kinto, asking if he still had any impression of it. Not long ago, Mocha saw Kinto's interview and found that the name of the shop owner matched exactly with the signature on the bookmark, so she came to try her luck. The moment Kinto took the bookmark, he immediately recognized it as the one he had given to Yuka back then. Mocha's request was for Kinto to meet her mother. So, on an ordinary afternoon, Yuka, now over 40, pushed open the door of the restaurant. She did not recognize that the man before her was Kinto, who had once saved her from the abyss. She simply sat quietly, waiting for the dishes to be served. The aroma of butter wafted from the pot, and a few blurry images flashed through Yuka's mind, like many years ago, when she had tasted the same delicacy here. As Yuka picked up the stir-fried udon that Kinto had served, the familiar taste slowed her movements. Bite after bite, tears filled her eyes without her noticing. Yuka looked at Kinto across the table, and memories sealed for 30 years began to awaken. The sunshine of youth, the path shaded by greenery, the sea breeze on the hillside, and the boy who had smiled and handed her a 4-leaf clover bookmark. The grievances and courage of 15-year-old Yuka gradually overlapped with this moment, 35 years later. No need for excessive pleasantries, nor any urgent questions. Just a smile exchanged, and they both understood that the waiting, longing, and regrets that had stretched over 30 years had finally settled at this moment. Kinto gazed at Yuka and asked the question that had been buried for many years. "Do you now live in a house with a terrace?" With tears and a smile, Yuka nodded and replied, "Yes,